Okay, this section is on epithelial tissues, and we'll look at each of these objectives in this section here. Our first objective is to describe the properties that distinguish epithelium from other tissue classes. Epithelia are sheets of closely adhering cells which are one or more cells thick. They cover body surfaces and line body cavities. Their upper surface is usually exposed to the environment or an internal space in the body. They make up most glands, and they are avascular, which means they don't have any blood vessels, but they do exchange materials and are nourished basically by connective tissues that lie underneath it. So here are the functions for epithelia. They protect deeper tissue from injury and infection. They produce and release chemical excretions. They excrete waste. They absorb chemicals, including nutrients. They are selective filter substances, and they sense stimuli. Epithelial cells are very close together, and then they have high rates of mitosis, so they're constantly dividing, making new cells. They have a basement membrane, which is a layer between the epithelium and the underlying connective tissues. This basement membrane is made of collagen, which is a protein, other proteins or glycoproteins, and protein carbohydrate complexes. And this basement membrane helps to anchor the epithelium to the connective tissue below it. There is a basal surface and an apical surface. The basal surface is the surface of the epithelium facing the basement membrane, and the apical surface is the surface that faces away, the other side of the tissue. So now we're going to look at all three of these objectives together. We're going to list and classify 8 types of epithelium and distinguish them from each other, and state where each type can be found. We're going to explain how the structural differences between epithelia relate to their functional differences, and visually recognize each epithelium type and from specimens or photographs, just like we did in the laboratory already. So simple epithelium, simple is going to refer to being one layer thick. They get their name from the shape of the cell, and all cells are going to be touching the basement membrane, so that's a key there. So some of the basic shapes down here are squamous, there is cuboidal and columnar. And so right here we have a case of a simple layer, and in this simple layer where all the cells touch the basement membrane, they look to be columnar in shape. And then we have stratified epithelia, and these are going to contain more than one layer. They are named by the shape of the apical cells, so the cells at the surface. So some cells are going to rest on top of others and do not touch the basement membrane. So here we have a case of stratified, and it looks like squamous because the apical side right here, this apical side here, they're flat. So that would be a stratified squamous epithelium. So there's going to be 4 types of epithelia with only one layer of cells. There's simple squamous, which squamous refers to thinner, scaly looking. Cuboidal, these are going to be square or round. Then there's columnar, these are going to be tall, narrow cells. And then there's pseudostratified columnar, and pseudo means false. So there's a falsely stratified. It's going to look like it's got multiple layers, but it really doesn't. In here, every cell is going to touch the basement membrane, but not all the cells are going to reach the apical surface. So we'll see that when we get to pseudostratified. And then there is special cells within some of the epithelia called goblet cells. They're going to be wine glass shaped, and they produce and secrete mucus. We find these on columnar and pseudostratified epithelia. Here is a photomicrograph showing simple squamous. Right here, this is one of the squamous cells, so that right here, everything above this layer here would be that simple squamous epithelium, and the cells are basically pretty flat, mostly all nucleus. So here is described as a single row of thin cells. And the function here is going to permit rapid diffusion and transport of substances. Some also are going to secrete a serous fluid, which is a fluid that the surface organs would secrete, kind of helps lubricate organs, so when they move around inside. They can be found in alveoli, glomeruli, endothelium and the serosa, which is the little thin layer that surrounds the organs. Now we have a simple cuboidal, and I'm going to draw a line here on the left. I'm drawing along the basement membrane, everything above this that is a single layer of cuboidal shaped cells. And then I'm going to draw a line on the other side, and again that's a basement membrane, and everything below that red line that I'm drawing are these cuboidal cells. This is probably a longitudinal section of a kidney tubule or a microscopic tube, and this is probably the space within there. So here the key again is a single layer of square or round cells, and we see that in the picture above. They are specialized for absorption and secretion, and mucus production and movement in some cases. So places we might find this are the liver, thyroid, mammary and salivary glands, the bronchioles, which are passages leading to the air sacs and lung, and the kidney tubules, which is probably likely what the picture above is. And indeed, the picture on the right says kidney tubule, so seems that seems to be correct. Then we have a simple columnar epithelium. There is a single row of tall, narrow cells. There is oval-shaped nucleus, and they are on the basal half of the cell. What that means is, if this is the middle right here, the nuclei tend to be towards the basement membrane side, or to the base side. Some are going to have a brush border with microvilli, which are these bumps here on top, or these extensions of the cell membrane, which increase surface area. Some are going to be ciliated and may possess goblet cells. So here's a goblet cell here and here, and then this is a diagram showing those are the cells that produce the mucus for secretion. And these are specialized for absorption and secretion, and secretion of mucus as well. These are going to line the gastrointestinal tract, the uterus, the kidney, and the uterine tubules, the uterine tubes. Then we have pseudostratified epithelium here. Here it's going to look like it's multi-layered, but it's not. All of the cells are going to touch the basement membrane down here, and what makes it look stratified is that the nuclei are at different levels. So it looks like there's many layers of cells based on the fact that the nuclei are all not at the same level. But every one of those are going to touch the basement membrane. So it's a simple layer. It just looks stratified. This particular tissue is going to have cilia and goblet cells. You can see the goblet cells there, and then here's the cilia right here. And they do secrete mucus and move the mucus. And where we find this would be the respiratory tracts and portions of the male urethra. So in the respiratory tract, we secrete mucus, and then these cilia would move that mucus up toward your throat so that you can either swallow or spit out any of the debris that's been captured by the mucus in your lungs. Stratified epithelia are going to range from 2 or more layers of cells. The cells are going to rest directly on one another, and only the deepest layer is going to attach to the basement membrane. There's 3 stratified epithelia, and they're named for the shape of the apical surface cells. So we have stratified squamous, stratified cuboidal, and stratified columnar, which is rare. And there's going to be a 4th type called transitional epithelium. So stratified squamous is the most widespread epithelium in the body. The deepest layers undergo continuous mitosis, so they're always dividing. And the daughter cells are going to push towards the surface and become flattened as they migrate outward. Finally, they'll die and flake off. They'll exfoliate, or another word for that is desquamation. And so there's going to be 2 kinds of stratified squamous epithelium. There is keratinized. There's the keratinized one and the non-keratinized one. Keratinized is going to be found on skin surface, abrasion resistant. Non-keratinized is going to lack surface layer of dead cells. Let's try this again, starting right here. Finally, the cells toward the surface are going to die and flake off. This is the process called exfoliation or desquamation. There's going to be 2 kinds of stratified squamous epithelium. There's going to be keratinized, and then there's non-keratinized. The keratinized are found on the skin surface, and they're abrasion resistant. and the non-keratinized are going to lack a layer of dead cells. So here's a photomicrograph showing a section or a piece of skin, probably from the sole of the foot or the hand. It's going to have this extra thick outermost layer called the stratum corneum. And you can see the multiple layers, and the cells are going to become flat and scaly as they move toward the surface. So I'm going to kind of highlight or draw where the epidermis starts, the deepest part of it. And so this layer of cells, right where I'm drawing the line, is where the cell division or mitosis is going to occur, and the cells are going to migrate outward. As they migrate outward, they're going to become thinner, and eventually they die. So these cells here on the outermost section are going to be very strong dead cells that are just filled with a protein called keratin, which is where it gets the name keratinized. And so these are going to be resistant to abrasion. It helps prevent water loss through the skin and resists invasion by pathogenic organisms or disease-causing organisms. So the location would be epidermis. The palms and soles of heavily keratinized feet is where this particular picture comes from. And then there's a non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, and here it's going to be the same as keratinized, but without the surface layer of dead cells. These are going to be resistant to abrasion as well and to penetration of pathogens or disease agents. The location would be the tongue, the oral mucosa, the esophagus, and the vagina. Here is stratified cuboidal epithelium. You can see I'm going to trace around this area here, trying to draw along the basement membrane. And it looks like there's at least 2 layers of cuboidal cells. And so here we're going to have 2 or more cell layers, and the surface cells are going to be square around. These may secrete sweat or produce sperm or produce the ovarian hormones like estrogen. So their locations are going to be in the sweat glands, the ducts of the sweat glands, the ovarian follicles, and the seminiferous tubules where sperm cells are produced. And then we have stratified or a form of epithelium that it looks stratified. It's going to be called transitional epithelium, and here is multi-layered epithelium, so it's stratified, and the cells are able to change from round to flat as the tissue is stretched. So we're going to find this in the urinary tract, like in the ureter and the urinary bladder, where stretching is involved when these structures fill with urine. So if we were to draw some kidney-looking structures there, the tubes that come out are called the ureters. And those empty into the urinary bladder. So the urinary bladder and these ureters are capable of stretching, and they're lined with the stratified epithelium.